The next avatar is Ramchandra. So the Ravan, who had 10 heads, he challenged the Lord. And Lord Ramchandra took up the challenge, killed him.
Om Vishnu Vinaya Krishna Krishna Vishnu Namaste Namaste Saraswati Devi Varanam Kuchana Visasas Vandaham Shri Guru Shri Chapakalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sarvajatam Sarina Raganatam Vikam Samsajivam Sadvaitam Sadvaitam Pujana Sankha Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paramasaharana Radha Shri Krishna Krishna Papa to Vishnu to Krishna Devata Krishna Bhagavan Vaishnava. So the great sage Valmiki saw a hunter kill a concha bird while it was mating, and he was so angry that he cursed the bird in an unusual meter never before heard. And he was wondering, why did I curse that bird in anger? When Lord Brahma came and said, actually this curse has been preordained because this meter you will use to describe the glories of Lord Ram. Do you have a cup?
Yeah.
Much easier to drink out of a cup when you're speaking than So Dasarath had 3 wives, but he had no male heirs. And he was very interested to have a proper successor for the kingdom. So he called for Rishi Shringa, which is a whole other story in itself, but we can tell about Rishi and his background. And he came and performed the yajna and produced the payasa by which, yes, thank you so much. Just set it down. Thank you very much. Yes. And as we know, the king gave half to Kausalya and half to Taipei, and then they each gave Sumitra some. And so we ended up with 4 brothers. Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrugna, who are the expansions of the Lord, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Sankarshan, and Ruda. And King Dasarath and Kausalya loved their eldest son, Ram, as dear as life. And all 4 brothers, who were all manifestations of Vishnu. Whatever relationships we have in this world, they have their divine parallel in the Lord's Lila. And the brothers, Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrugna, they were all trained how to rule the kingdom in proper military arts, diplomacy, and so forth. And one day, Vishwamitra Muni came to see Dasarath and said, my yajna is being bothered by demons. And I can't kill him myself because as a Brahmana, if I kill him, that will interfere with the whole yajna. And Dasarath said, well, whatever you want, you can have. He seemed to have a problem with this. You can have whatever you want, king. So Vishwamitra says, fine, I want Ram and Lakshman. Ram and Lakshman, they're only 16, they're not fully trained, they'll be killed by these demons. I'll go with my army. Vishwamitra says, no, I want them. Okay? And Vasistha, who was the guru, he said, don't worry, Vishwamitra will protect your sons. It will be good for them. So then Ram and Lakshman went with Vishwamitra Muni, who taught them all about divine weapons. Now, these divine weapons all belong to already Ram and Lakshman. They're God, they have all these weapons. But still, the devotees come and act as a servant. And Vishwamitra is in this mood of Vatsalya Bhav. He's in this mood of parental love. And as they were going to the yajna, they came upon a hermitage where Vishwamitra says to Ram, you please step on this stone. And as he did so, Ahalya, who had been cursed by her husband because of a dalliance with Indra, came out and offered respects and then joined her husband. And they go further and they find the great female demon Tarika. She and her sons had been terrorizing the sages and polluting the sacrifices. It's interesting that with both Krishna and Ram, the first demon they kill is a woman. Yes? And then they come upon the yajna, where Maricha and Subahu were throwing blood and bones and pus and stool and urine on the yajna. And so Ram killed Subahu, but he didn't kill Maricha. He took an arrow and sent him at a great distance. Now, no one at the time could understand why he did this. Sometimes the actions of the Lord are bewildering to us. You're thinking, it was a demon, just kill him. What are you doing? Even the Singadev's fighting with Hiranyakashipu, he lets him slip from his hand. And the demigods are all upset. But the Lord had a greater plan. So after this, Vishwamitra tells the young princes, I would like to take you to Mithila, because there is something wonderful going there. Some time ago, King Janaka was taking a ceremonial plow to prepare the land for a yajna. And there he found in the ground from Mother Earth, and that's important, yes? The Sita comes from Mother Earth. He found there a box with a beautiful baby girl. So King Janaka and his wife adopted this daughter as their own. And Vishwamitra said, now the time is for her marriage. And her father has thought, who am I going to get to marry this divine personality who's come from the earth? But when Sita Devi was quite young, she had moved the bow of Shiva, which normally could be moved. Some accounts say 300 men, some say 1,500 men. But in any case, a lot of strong men were required just to move this one bow, and Sita Devi moved it easily. So Janaka said, okay, this is the sign. Whoever can lift this bow and spring it will marry her. So Vishwamitra took Ram and Lakshman there to the Swayamvar, and of course so many princes were trying. And Ram very easily lifted the bow and strung it. And when he strung it, it broke.
The woman called to their friends, come, 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 see this beautiful exchange. Look at the beautiful Sita. See the handsome Ram.
So then there was a wedding also of Janak's own natural daughter, Urmila, with Ram's brother Lakshman. And when the news had been sent to Dasarath, he said, well, I have two other sons. And Janak said, well, I have two nieces. So the daughters of Janak's brother, Red, Bharat, and Shatrughna. So these four happy couples are now about to return to Ayodhya. And on the way, they meet. Who do they meet? Parasuram. They meet Parasuram, who challenges Ram, said, how dare you break Lord Shiva's bow? Who do you think you are to break Lord Shiva's bow? Do you think you can handle Vishnu's bow? So of course the Lord is Vishnu, so of course he can handle Vishnu's bow. And he tells Parasuram, he says, now your time is finished. You are no longer the reigning avatar. So Sita and Ram were very happy in Ayodhya. And Dasarath began to consider, I didn't have any children until I was already older. And I wanted to have children to carry on the succession, to rule the kingdom. And now that Ram is married and he's mature, it is time to coronate him. And he consulted with the learned ministers and astrologers, And they said, tomorrow will be a very good day. Do it right now. So we have some sayings in English. Strike while the iron is hot. Or make hay while the sun is shining. We have these expressions. In other words, if there's a good opportune moment, you don't delay. So Dasratha was thinking like that. However, Bharat and Shatrughna were, as you say in India, out of station. When I first heard that expression, I'm like, what? They're not at the train station? I couldn't figure it out today. So they were not in Ayodhya. They were visiting Kaikeyi's family. And because Dasratha had no children, when he married Kaikeyi, there had been some discussion that Kaikeyi's child could be the king. But once all four boys were born, then that was no longer germane. So the idea was the other queens hadn't born children, so Kaikeyi. But you know how there's always people who see conspiracies everywhere? Yes, I hope none of you are in the audience. Connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. Oh, I know why that happened, because of this and this and this and this. Sometimes we do this in our personal life. I wrote to this person. They haven't written back. It's been already 4 hours. It must be because of this and this and this. And we make up a whole story in our minds. Have we ever done? You don't have to raise your hands, but have we ever done this? We create a whole story, and then we find out, oh, my phone was off. I was in a meeting or something. So this is what Mantra did. She created a whole story. My dear friends, it's very important to be able to separate objective facts from our stories about those facts. To do that requires some humility. This is what I call practical humility. I can be wrong. What a novel idea. I can be wrong. Srila Prabhupada talks about 4 defects of conditioned souls. Imperfect senses, illusion, can make mistakes, and even cheat. We can cheat ourselves even. We can fool ourselves. We can rationalize something to ourselves. That is not true. Make up excuses for why we do something or why we don't do something. It's embarrassing for me to tell you that it was many years in the Krishna consciousness movement before I realized that those 4 defects applied to me. And that what I perceive with my senses is not objective truth. None of us perceive objective truth with our senses. We have imperfect senses. That means what I see, what I hear, what I smell, what I taste, what I touch is not exactly the same as what exists in reality. And then the explanation my mind gives as to what my senses are perceiving, what's the meaning behind what my senses are perceiving, is often partially or completely wrong. Just like at a crime scene, the police gather evidence, but the evidence often points in more than one direction. So we are gathering evidence with our senses. Our senses are not perceiving objective reality. Then our mind interprets what our senses perceives, and our mind interprets what's happening according to our preconceived notion, according to our desires, according to our culture, according to our individual bias, according to our past experiences. Somebody else cheated me 5 years ago, and when someone else acts in a way that reminds me of it, I think, oh, they're cheating. And my dear friends, if we are conditioned souls, we do this. You cannot say, I am not pure, but I don't do this. It's contradictory. We need to not take the interpretations of our mind as truth. It is always helpful to think I may be wrong. My story about what has happened may be wrong. If everyone were to act like this, we would get along so much better with each other. We get so convinced about other people's motives. That's what the mistake Mantra made, correct? She made a mistake about Dasarath's motives. She decided that his motives was to disenfranchise Kaikeyi and Bharat. Were that his motives? Not at all. It never even occurred to him. He didn't even consider it. And yet Mantra was convinced that Dasarath had intentionally manipulated the situation. Now, at first, Kaikeyi was very dismissive of Mantra, as she should have been. But eventually, Mantra kind of wore her down. And Mantra starts creating this whole picture of, Kausalya is going to be chief, and Ram's going to be chief, and you're just going to be an insignificant servant, and Bharat's going to be an insignificant servant. You won't be treated as royalty anymore. You'll be sidelined. She's creating this whole doomsday scenario, which again was the furthest thing from Dasarath's intention. But we should be careful, because it's easy for us to all have a little mantra in our brain. This is happening, this, because God. And there's nothing actually there. And we all know that people do this to us sometimes, right? We're just kind of innocently going about our lives. And somebody will, oh, you did this because of this. You want this. And this can happen between family members. It can happen between friends. It can happen in the community. So mantras, doomsday imagination, of course, this is all lila. It's all lila. It's all the Lord's desire. But still, there's lessons for us here. You understand? The lesson is be careful. Kaikeyi should have been careful, and she wasn't. And then she does this whole manipulative thing. So first Mantra is manipulating, then Kaikeyi is manipulating. She takes off her fancy clothes and her jewels, and she goes in the sulking room. Can you imagine having a house so big that you have a sulking room? And Dasarath's getting ready for this coronation the next day. He expects to find Kaikeyi in her chambers and rejoicing, and instead she's in the sulking room. She really plays this up. I mean, actually, she's a Kshatrani also. She knows how to be diplomatic. She knows how to negotiate. Seriously. So she's like, you remember I saved your life on the battlefield? Don't think that Kshatriya women were all just home, making pastries. She says, I saved your life on the battlefield. Oh, yes, my dear, I remember. And you said 2 promises. Again, this is whatever you want. Please don't do that. Except with God, you can do that. But otherwise, please don't go to someone and say, you can have whatever you want. And she said, you told me 2 boons, whatever I want. Oh, of course, dear. And I said, I'd ask them later. Yes, dear. And Dasarath's the opposite of Mantra. Instead of imagining doomsday things, he's imagining my wife is going to want some jewelry or something. You promise again? You promise? Yes, of course. He says, okay, you put my son Bharat as king, and you banish Ram for 14 years. And the idea, Mantra's idea of banishing Ram was that this way people would forget about him. That if Ram was still around, there might be an insurrection. Yes? So, of course, when Sita hears, but first Lakshman hears about this, and he's ready to have a war. And Ram says, no, we're not going to have a war against our father. And Lakshman's like, well, I'll come with you. And Sita hears, and she says, I'll come with you. Just like in the Western marriage vows, richer or poorer, sickness and health, happiness and stress. She says, I'm not going to be your wife just in the palace. I'm also going to be your wife in the forest. And then Kaikeyi is insisting that they put on the garb of ascetics and go to the forest. And meanwhile, Dasarath is just completely devastated. Ram, Lakshman, and Sita, they take leave of Kausalya. And the citizens want to follow Ram into the forest. They say, you're our Ayodhya, we will follow you into the forest. So of course they do. But then when everyone is sleeping by the bank of the river, Ram crosses the river in the chariot, so there's no tire tracks. And the citizens wake up in the morning and he's gone. Then in the forest, Ram finds a tribal king, Gua. It's interesting with Ram Lila that he very much has as devotees, animals and tribals. I mean, he has very sophisticated devotees as well. But animals, tribals, demons like Bhisham. And Guha says you can stay here, and Ram says, no, we're exiled. Exile means we can't live in any city, even your forest city. Please help us to find some proper place to stay in the forest for our exiles. So Guha arranges that they can take a boat to cross the Ganga, and the boatman asks simply for the payment of being able to wash their feet. Of course, he's a little hesitant because he heard about Ahalya. He was hoping that Ram's feet wouldn't break his boat into pieces. So they cross the Ganga, at which point that they cross the Ganga, and Sita prays to Mother Ganga for their safe return. When they cross, they find many sages. And something very interesting happens here. The sages say to Ram, we sages are bothered by Rakshasas who sometimes eat our members. Would you please protect us? And so Ram says, yes, I will give you protection. And then Sita asked Ram afterwards, she said, we're living in the forest. You're no longer in the kingdom as a ruler. Why are you taking vows of protecting? And Ram says, well, we're not vanaprasthas, we're still grahastas. I'm still royalty. I'm in exile, but I'm still doing my occupational duty of protection. There's no contradiction. We're not in the forest as ascetics. He said, anyway, I already promised. So that's what it is. By the way, we see a little contrast here with Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj, a different Bharat, not Ram's brother. Rishabdev's son, Bharat. So he actually retired from his kingdom and went to the forest as a renunciate. But he had not given up his mood of being the protector. And so when there was this orphaned baby deer, and there was this orphaned fawn, he went too far. Yes, he should have taken care of it. Any human being would do that. But he took this role of being the protector, but that was no longer his dharma. He had given up that dharma. He'd given over the kingdom to someone else. He'd wanted to be renunciate. He was doing someone else's dharma. But here Ram says, no, this is still my dharma. Meanwhile, Bharat returns to Ayodhya, finds out about all these manipulations of his mother, renounces his mother. Srila Prabhupada gives Bharat as an example of someone who renounces their mother. He has a list of persons who renounce their authorities for the sake of Krishna. Like Prahlad renounces his father, and Bharat renounces his mother. And he said, I'm not having anything to do with any of this. He actually says, you're not my mother anymore. He says, I will call you the queen, but not my mother. And when Dasarath hears that Ram and Lakshman have gone deep into the forest, he becomes blind, and he dies in separation from Ram. Of course, there's a whole other story, which we don't have time to tell, about how Dasarath was cursed that he would die in separation from his son. But to die in separation from your son materially is not very auspicious. Then you'll take another birth, hoping you can be with that jiva again. But if you die in separation from the Lord, that is very auspicious. That's the most auspicious way. So Dasarath had this most auspicious passing. Meanwhile, Bharat's completely upset about this whole thing. And he's like, I'm going to go to the forest and I'm going to get Ram and bring him back and fix this whole thing. Now, when Bharat's on his way to the forest, he brings a whole army with him. And Lakshmana sees him from a distance. He says, Bharat's coming with his army. He's not satisfied with what his mother did. He's going to come to kill you. This is another, of course, again, this is Leela and Lakshman's God. But this is another example of jumping to conclusions based on our own imperfect perception. And Ram's like, Bharat's not going to do that. Don't worry about it. And Bharat tries to convince Ram to come back and rule. And Ram's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to break my father's promise. I'm not going to break my devotee's promise is a recurring theme in the Shastra. The Lord may break his own promise, but he won't break the promise of a devotee. When Prabhupada says you chant 16 mountains, follow these principles, serve Krishna, you will attain perfection, then Krishna has to fulfill that promise. Krishna fulfills the promises of his devotees. So Ram is like, I'm going to honor my father's promise. But he had a problem that Bharat was also stubborn. Well, what do you do? Bharat says, well, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. I'm not going to go be the king. Sorry, not going to happen. So they come up with a compromise, and Ram says, all right, technically I'll be the king, but I have to do this 14-year exile. So you rule as my representative. So Bharat says, all right, give me your shoes. I'll put your shoes on the throne. And Bharat actually performs more austerities than Ram for the whole 14 years. He stays somewhat outside the city. Bhagavatam says he just eats barley cooked in the urine of a cow. He's doing a lot of tapasya. So then Ram, Lakshman, and Sita decide they're not going to stay there anymore at Chitrakoot because now everybody knows where they are. So everybody's going to come, and it will be a disturbance to Ayodhya. So they decide that they're going to move. So they start going through the forest looking for another place. And they start running into demons. So they run into Virad. He's the first demon. And they kill Virad. And he actually was a celestial being that was cursed. And they run into Shurpanakha. So Shurpanakha is Ravana's sister, a Rakshasi. And she falls in love with Ram. So I used to act in the Ramayana. Actually, first time I saw the Ramayana play, I was with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was sitting maybe 2 rows ahead of me. And my god sister Rasikya was playing Sita, and her husband Roy Taksha was playing Ram. They both since left this planet. Lokamangala, who's also no longer with us, he was playing Ravana. And I remember, especially with the fight between Ravana and Jatayu when that happened. So I felt that I wasn't no longer in New York watching the theater, but I was actually in the forest with the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. Anyway, later after that, after Prabhupada left the planet, I ended up joining the Ramayana theater group, and I played Shurpanakha. It was very hard, actually. I had to kind of try to psych myself up because I was, I remember I would go backstage and try to say the verses from the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita about the demoniac mentality. I'm trying to get myself into the mood of playing too. So Shurpanakha comes and says, I wish to unite myself with you, O best of men. Be my husband. What is this Sita to you? And then Ram says, well, I've taken this vow of Ekpatni Vrat. Now, Ekpatni Vrat is not like modern idea where you marry someone and then when they die, you marry someone else. This was like, even they die, you don't marry someone. It's a lifetime. He says, but my brother Lakshman, he's not taking this vow, and his wife, Urmila, she's not here. You can marry him. And she goes to Lakshman, and he says, but I'm just living here as a servant. You're a princess. You're not going to be happy being a servant. Oh, it is this beautiful girl that stands between me and you. I will eat her. I still remember some of my own. So the Lakshman cuts off her nose and ears. So then she goes to her brothers, Kar and Dushan, who are camped not far away. And she complains to them, Kar, Dushan, and Trishir. And they then attack Ram and Lakshman with 14,000 Rakshasas. And Ram asks Lakshman to take Sita to a safe place, and he alone kills all of them except for Akampan. Akampan is the only survivor. So Akampan goes to Ravana and tells him what happened. There's a human, because Ram appears to be a human. He's not there as Vishnu. He says there's a human who's killed your brothers in the forest and single-handedly killed 14,000 Rakshasas. And while Akampan is explaining this to Ravana, Shurapanika walks in. Ah! My dear brother, there is this human in the forest. He's killed your army. And he has a very beautiful wife. Because Ravana liked to collect beautiful women. He didn't care if they were married or not, whatever. Like people have collections of watches or coins, collected women. She said he has a very beautiful wife. And I wanted to bring her to you. And I tried. And when I tried, Lakshman cut off my nose and ears. Are you going to avenge me? Are you a brother, a hero, a king? And I cried and fell on the stage. Akampan is telling Ravana, he says, this is a really bad idea. This is a really, really bad idea. But Ravana gets fixated. First of all, his honor is at stake because Shurapanika had kind of, challenged him in front of the court. So his ego was at stake. But also he's very attracted to this idea of carrying off Sita. So he decides that he's not going to face Ram directly. That he's going to do this in a sneaky way. So he goes to Marich. Now, Marich had retired after Ram had sent him far away with an arrow. He had stopped his demoniac activities and he was performing austerities. And Ravana went to him and says, I know you're an expert magician. I would like you to create a device so that I can kidnap the Sita. And Maricha had already encountered Ram. And he says also to Ravana, Ravana keeps getting good advice that he ignores. He consistently gets good advice and he consistently ignores it. And Marich says to him, I wouldn't mess with this Ram at all. He's not a human. He looks like he's a human, but he's not. This is a really bad idea. Just leave it alone. Count your, just cut your losses. You lost the 14,000 in your brothers, leave it. And Ravana says, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to kill you. Said, you have a choice. Because Marich said, I do this, Ram's going to kill me. And Ravana says, you have a choice. Ram can kill you or I can kill you. Now, it's interesting because when you're killed by the Lord, you get liberation. So it was a very good choice. But Marich wasn't calculating it like that. He was calculating in terms of honor. That if your own king kills you, that's dishonorable. If you get killed for being a traitor, that's dishonorable. If you get killed by an enemy, that's honorable. So that was his calculation. So he transforms himself into this magical deer and comes to the hermitage while Ravana, disguised as a holy man, is waiting off to the side. So Sita sees this deer and she says, oh, Ram, look at this amazing deer. Why don't we capture this deer? We only have a year left now in our exile. Let's capture the deer and bring it back to Ayodhya. And if you can't capture it alive, you kill it and we'll bring the skin back. And Lakshman says, I don't think that this is a normal deer. There's something not right about this deer. And Ram says, well, if it's a demon in disguise, I'll kill it. What is the problem? So Ram goes after the deer. And of course, the deer eventually reveals its true form as Marich. And as Ram shoots an arrow at it, Marich imitates Ram's voice and calls out, Lakshman, Sita, help! At which time Sita loses it and tells Lakshman, you have to go save your brother. Do you have designs on me? And Lakshman then leaves her alone. At which time Ravana comes dressed as a holy person. My dear friends, demons sometimes dress up as holy. But that doesn't mean we should go around our devotee community saying but it does happen. It happens in Krishna's Leela too, right? There's Putana, there's Pralambasura, there's Vyomasura. Even in our modern day, sometimes criminals dress up as police officers. If you're evil and you want to cause the most trouble, you disguise yourself as a saintly person. Again, this is Leela, but even Sita didn't recognize him. In Krishna's Leela, we find the cowherd boys, they're not recognizing Pralambasura. The residents of Vrindavan, they don't recognize Putana. So sometimes it happens that in our society of devotees, there's actually a demon pretending to be a devotee. It happens. It happens. And sometimes we don't recognize them. We think they're a devotee, we find out that they're not. This does happen. I'm not saying that everyone who has some weakness and struggles is a demon, but sometimes they're actually demons. But many years ago, one man who entered our school in Vrindavan in the 70s, and he was terribly abusing the children. And when it was found out, when he was discovered in the 80s, he said, I intentionally came here to Vrindavan to do this to prove that I could get away with it. There's no God. But there are people like this. Again, you're probably not going to run into anyone. It happens. It's been happening since the beginning of time. So Ravana comes and he comes as a holy man. I come to beg alms, and Sita, being trained in proper etiquette, she goes to give him alms, at which point he reveals his identity and carries her away. Now he carries her away on his chariot, but one of Ram's devotees, Jatayu, was there. Again, we don't think of a vulture as being a very nice creature. But this vulture was a pure devotee. And he goes to attack Ravana. And he was able to actually destroy Ravana's chariot. He was able to completely smash Ravana's chariot. But Ravana cut off Jatayu's wings and talons. It was this scene in the Ramayana when I was sitting behind Prabhupada. This is before I was acting in the Ramayana. Where, I felt that all of a sudden, it didn't last long, a few minutes perhaps, but I wasn't in the theater anymore. And I was actually in the Leela. Prabhupada was very, very pleased with Rasagya, who played Sita. He said she was the best actress in the world. And when Jatayu was starting to fight Ravana, she said, no, Jatayu, don't. You are too old and he is much stronger than you. And it was just this heartbreaking scene. Jatayu is a good example of the fact that sometimes externally our devotional service is a failure. Sometimes we try to do some service for the Lord and it fails. You may try to build a temple, you can't get the permits, you can't build it, it doesn't work. You try to do some project, something, maybe it's a little project, maybe you're trying to cook something and somehow something goes wrong with your oven and it burns. Sometimes there's a failure. But Krishna's not looking at the result. He's looking at the effort and the intention. So Jatayu failed to stop Ravana from carrying Sita, but he was still alive when Rama and Lakshman came back to the hermitage, found Sita gone, and found Jatayu there. And he was able to do some service by telling them that it was Ravana who had kidnapped Sita and gone to the south, because otherwise Sita was just gone. They didn't know who she was. And then Ram and Lakshman are going everywhere through the forest looking for Sita, not finding her anywhere. As they're going looking, they get captured by Kadamba. So in the theater group, we had this amazing costume for Kadamba, and we used to go on Harinam in our costumes. And we would advertise the theater, because in New York we had a professional theater. If we had a professional stage, sound booth, everything, we would charge for it. We were considered off Broadway. That's a category. In New York for theater, there's Broadway, off-Broadway, and off Broadway. One of my grandsons was saying, why do they call it Broadway? I said, because there's a street called Broadway, and that's where the theaters are. The most famous theaters in the world. And we actually got magazines and newspapers to come and watch the performance and review it. So anyway, we'd go out in our costumes and on Harinam, and we'd give out flyers about the theater performance. And this devotee in this Kadamba costume, it was really some costume with these huge arms. So Kadamba captures Ram and Lakshman in his arms, and Ram and Lakshman cut off the arms of Kadamba, at which point he directs them. He said, please burn my body. And he's also a celestial being. And he says, you have to find a Shabari, and she will help you to find Sita. So Shabari had been a tribal who became a disciple of Matangi. And Matangi had, when he was ready to depart this earth, she wanted to follow her guru. And he said, no, you have to stay to greet the Lord, who will come in the form of Ram and Lakshman. So she took her guru very seriously, and every day she would prepare. Every day she would put flowers on the path and pick berries and prepare. And every day they wouldn't come. And the next day she would prepare and they wouldn't come. And the next day she would prepare and they wouldn't come, but she never gave up. Just like we were told, you chant Hare Krishna, one day Krishna will come. My dear friends, one day Krishna will come. Don't give up. So one day, as she did every day, she was preparing and she had become very elderly. And then she looks and there's Ram and Lakshman. And she's giving them the berries she picked. They say that she was so careful to make sure they were good that she tasted them first. And she told them, she said, the person who will help you is Sugriva. You have to go to Lake Pampa and you have to take shelter of Sugriva. And then she said, please give me permission to depart. And there, in the presence of Ram and Lakshman, she left her body and went to Vaikuntha. So then Ram and Lakshman, following her advice, they go to Lake Pampa, where they first meet Hanuman, and then they meet Sugriva, and they find out that Sugriva has also been disenfranchised. So he's also been exiled. His brother has taken over the kingdom, and his brother has kidnapped his wife. Not exactly parallel. And so they make a pact of friendship. And Sugriva says, if you can get me back my kingdom, then I have armies, and I can help you. And it's very interesting, of course, how Ram kills Bali. Because he kills him. The gopis criticize Krishna, by the way, for this. They say, oh, you killed Bali like a hunter from behind the tree. You didn't kill him like exception. And when Bali was dying, and he asked Ram, why did you kill me like this? And Ram said, because you yourself, how can you take your brother's wife and your brother's kingdom? He said, you didn't deserve to be killed in an honorable way. You didn't deserve a hero's death. So then, of course, Sugriva takes over the kingdom, and then this is a sad thing. Sugriva kind of falls into Maya. he'd been living an austere life for a long time. I mean, after all, he's a monkey. So we cut him some slack. And he's been living in the forest for a long time, and he gets his kingdom back. And he just gets into enjoying his kingdom. He forgets. And Ram's waiting for the rainy season to be over. If you waited for the rainy season to be over in Auckland, you'd be waiting on I just remembered how one time I was in Mumbai, and some devotees were driving me to the airport. This was during the rainy season. And they said, so Mataji, in America, do you get enough rain? I said, where I live, yes, we get enough rain. And they were quiet for a while. And they said, when you go home, is this your rainy season? And I said, we don't have a rainy season. And then they're quiet for a while. And I said, well, when does it rain? And I said, well, it can rain anytime. And they were really quiet for a while. And I said, how do you know when to bring an umbrella? So anyway, Ram was waiting for the rainy season to be over. Then it was over. He still didn't hear from Sugriva. And because Ram was exiled, he wouldn't enter a city. So he wouldn't enter the city of Kiskinda. But Lakshman said, well, I don't have that constraint on me. I can enter the city. My dear folks, you don't want Lakshman entering your city angry at you. Like Balaram with Hastinapur when he was angry when they had Samba and he caused an earthquake and almost pulled Hastinapur into the Ganga. So Lakshman comes to Kiskinda and he himself is the earthquake. Anyway, the ladies pacify him. And then Sugriva, the ladies kind of calm him down, and then Sugriva pacifies him. Yes, I'm actually taking care of this right now. It's happening right now. So Sugriva calls his armies, and they divide them into 4 groups to go in the 4 directions. But because Jatayu had seen Ravana go to the south, therefore they thought that the group going south was the most likely to find Sita. So in that group, they had Hanuman, and Ram gave Hanuman his ring. He said, because Sita won't know who you are. How will she know who you are? And so Ram gives him his ring and says, this way you can show Sita that you are my messenger. So Ram was pinning most of his hopes on Hanuman. And there's, of course, another long story about Hanuman's group and how they get lost and they end up in a magical cave and so many things. If we told the whole story, we'd be here for a whole year telling the whole story. But they end up on the shore of the ocean. And on the shore of the ocean, they meet Jatayu's brother, Sampati, who says, I can't fly anymore, but I can see Sita in Lanka across the ocean. And of course, the various monkeys are debating who can jump across the ocean. And Hanuman, because he had caused some trouble when he was young, he had forgotten his powers. And Jambavan reminds him, actually, you have these powers, you're able to jump. So Hanuman jumps across the ocean. And this is again a long story because he has helpers and he has obstacles. And there's so many wonderful stories just about Hanuman jumping across the ocean, tricking demons. And finally he gets to Lanka, and there he's looking for Sita. And first he looks in Ravana's palaces, where there are so many beautiful women, and he's like, nah, this isn't Sita. And he finally finds her in the Ashok garden. And there Hanuman made himself very small, and he's sitting in a tree, just watching. And he watches Ravana come. And Hanuman hears Ravana threatening Sita. He says, I've waited long enough. Ravana was cursed that he couldn't force himself on her. He said, I've waited long enough. He said, you have 2 more months to voluntarily surrender to me or I will eat you. You know, and I've often thought, like, is this supposed to be enticing? The new pickup line in the bars, you know, come home with me or I will cut you up and eat you. It's not very attractive, is it? So this is not the way Krishna loves us. Krishna wants our voluntary love. This is the mood of the demon. Krishna doesn't force. So Hanuman, he's wondering, how am I going to win Sita? So he starts actually singing the story of Lord Ram from the tree. And Sita is listening and she's wondering, who is there in Lanka who's singing the story of my Lord? And he comes down before her, and at first she's like, oh, you're Ravana in disguise. She doesn't trust him. But he shows her the ring and he says, actually, I've come from Ram. And he says, if you want, I can put you on my back and I can carry you to Ram. She says, no, that's not proper. Ram himself should rescue me. You simply bring him this message. And then he's thinking, okay, well, I've done my duty. I found Sita. That was my duty. And I can come back and tell Ram where she is. But while I'm here, let me do a little reconnaissance. Might as well. I'm already here. So he thinks, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be a spy in the most efficient manner? And he thought also, let me kind of put literally the fear of God into Ravana. So he acted in a way to get himself captured. Sita's in the Ashok Grove, and he starts knocking down the trees and eating the fruits as if it was his own personal garden, which attracted the attention of some of Ravana's sons who came to fight with him. And eventually they tied him up, although Hanuman actually couldn't be tied up. And they bring him to the court of Ravana. At that point, Ravana, he tells Ravana, he says, you know, you should return Sita. Again, Ravana keeps getting this good advice. You should return Sita, or you'll be sorry. And Ravana's like, forget it. I'm never going to return Sita. Couldn't even enjoy her, but he wanted to keep her anyway. And then he says, kill this messenger. And Vibhishan speaks up and said, you cannot kill a messenger. You can maim him, but you can't kill him. So Ravana says, all right, let's set fire to his tail and drag him through the streets of Lanka. Bad move on Ravana's part. He burns down Lanka. I guess to find everything that's going on there, and then he jumps back. And then the monkeys go back to Kishkinda, and they inform everyone. And so all of Sugriva's army and Ram and Lakshman then come to the shore of the ocean. And Ram asks the ocean to give way for 3 days. He's in meditation, and when the ocean doesn't appear, he pulls his arrow and he's about to burn up all the ocean when finally the ocean appears. He says, what can I do? What can I do? He says, let us build a bridge. So when they start to build the bridge, meanwhile, back in Lanka, people are a little freaked out about Hanuman having burned down the city. And there's pressure mounting on Ravana to return Sita. One of the people pressuring Ravana is Vibhishan. And Ravana threatens him with imprisonment. So he takes some of his friends and leaves. Prabhupada said that he actually had the mood that he was taking sannyas. I'm leaving my kingdom, I'm leaving my family. And when he comes, the monkeys and even Lakshman says, we're not going to take this demon who surrenders. And Lakshman says, if he leaves his own brother and at a time of crisis, how can we trust him? And then Hanuman speaks up and he says, but he spoke up for me in Ravana's court. And Ram says something significant. He says, even if Ravana came to me and surrendered, I would accept him. And Vibhishan was very crucial because he was able to give all kinds of inside information about the enemy and help them win. All right, so they build the bridge to Lanka with the stones. And once they reach Lanka, and again, Ravana is being told, there is a bridge built across the ocean. And Ram and Lakshman and the monkeys are coming. You should surrender. And he's like, no. You know, sometimes in our life, it's obvious that Krishna is asking us to surrender something. And we keep going, no. So then the battle begins. It's a long, complicated battle. I'm definitely not going to tell you everything about the battle. But at one time, there was a snake weapon sent to Ram and Lakshman and appeared that they were going to be defeated. And then Garuda came and ate the snakes. Things were going really badly for Ravana. His sons were being killed. His brothers were being killed. The snake weapon didn't work. So he decided, I have a secret weapon named Kumbhakarna. He said, I know it isn't his normal time to wake up, but wake him up. Once Kumbhakarna was woken up, he actually also told Ravana to give Sita back. But when Ravana refused, he said, all right, I'll fight for you. And he goes on the battlefield, stepping on monkeys and eating monkeys. Finally, Lord Ramachandra cuts off his arms and throws him into the sea. Then there's an attack on Lakshmana. And Lakshmana appears to be about to depart this world. And the doctor comes and sees him and says, the only cure is in a mountain in the Himalayas, the Sanjeevani herb. And it looks like this, like this, like this. Is there anyone who could get it? Hanuman's like, I can get it. So he jumps to the Himalayas and he's looking around on the mountain and he's like, I'm really not sure. You know how sometimes, you know, your wife or your husband sends you to the shop to get something and then you're there. Is it that one? Is it that one? Hey, can you send me a picture? You're taking pictures? Is it this one? Is it this one? So Hanuman's like, I don't have a lot of time. I don't know which one it is. I'll just bring the whole mountain. I'll figure it out when I get there. Probably said he was just a monkey, but he was strong. So he brings back this whole mountain, which revives Lakshman. And then, of course, with the help of Vibhishan, Lakshman kills Indrajit. And you'd think at that point, Ravana would surrender. He had nobody left but himself. But his ego just wouldn't let him surrender. And he's holding on to Sita, who he can't even enjoy. My dear friends, if we're a conditioned soul, we're all like Ravana. We're holding on to material things that aren't even pleasurable for us, that aren't even really satisfying our desires. And we're being told over and over again, surrender to Krishna. We say, tomorrow, maybe. So there's this battle and Ravana comes out in his chariot. And to make things equal, Indra gives Ram his chariot with his chariot driver. And the battle is raging for quite some time. Of course, Ravana displays his 10 heads. And finally, Ram tries to cut off his heads. They keep growing back. And finally, Ram shoots an arrow into Ravana's heart. Jai Shri Ram!
Jai.
That's the extent of my expertise in creating animation. So when Ravana dies, His wife Mandodari, she laments. She said, "You've made your body fit to be eaten by vultures and your soul fit to go to hell," which is interesting because she's one of the most chaste ladies, but still she wasn't a fool. And Vibhishan there is also lamenting. Of course, Ram had already crowned Vibhishan as the king of Lanka before they even crossed the bridge. So now he was formally installed, and now you'd think there'd be just a happy ending. The Ramayana is full of pathos. So Ram says, "Now bring Sita." And she says, "Can I come as I am?" No, get dressed up. All right, so she does that. As she's being carried in a palanquin, the monkeys all want to see her, and Ram says, "Let them see her. Let's have her come out of the palanquin." They all fought for her. They all risked their lives for her. And when she comes and she's ready to see her Lord, then Ram says, "Lakshman, build a fire." By the way, Lakshman didn't like that very much. Therefore, in Krishna Lila, he's the older brother. So, of course, there's also a backstory to this, that before Ravana kidnapped Sita, that actually Sita was taken in the protection of Agni. And there was a woman who was there. This was a woman who actually had wanted to marry Ram and wanted to defeat Ravana, who had tried to kidnap her. So she had this, because Ram had this Ekpatni Vrat, so she couldn't marry Ram, but she could be Ram's wife in separation. But that's a whole other, again, amazing pastime. So when this fire is there, so this Maya Sita, she enters the fire and the real Sita comes out. And this story is told in the Kurma Purana. We know in Chaitanya Lila, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in South India, he met this Ramana who invited him for lunch. "Please come to my house for lunch." And Mahaprabhu goes there for lunch. And this Brahmana hadn't even started cooking. He hadn't even washed the veggies or anything. He's just there crying. Mahaprabhu said, "What's going on?" He says, "She just kidnapped. She's kidnapped. I can't cook. She's been touched by Ravana. I can't cook. I can't eat." And somehow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's also Krishna, pacified him. He said, "No, it's okay. Nobody can touch Mother Sita. It's all right. And then as Mahaprabhu was traveling further, he came into a temple where there was a copy of the Kurma Purana that explained that the Sita that Ravana kidnapped was actually a Maya Sita. She was another person. I'm trying to remember her name. It starts with a V. Anyway, so it was actually somebody else. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so kind and considerate on this devotee of his that he had somebody copy this page from the Kurma Purana, and with the permission of the temple priest, and he had a copy left in the temple, and he took the original, so the Brahma would be convinced. And then Mahaprabhu backtracked. He went back to that Brahmana's house and says, "Here's the evidence that it was not the original Sita." So much love the Lord has for his devotees. So now everybody's happy, and Ravana had this airship that he had stolen from Kuvera. So now the 14 years have passed. All the timing just ended up perfect. And so Ram, Lakshman, Sita, along with Hanuman, Sugriva, Vibhishan, and some others, they all get on this airship from Kuvera, and they all return to Ayodhya in triumph. And as it says in the 9th canto, as the Lord sat on his airplane of flowers, with women offering him prayers and reciters chanting about his characteristics, he appeared like the moon with the stars and planets. And then they all return in triumph to Ayodhya. then Ram was ruling in peace. And then we would like to end the story here. We don't like it if we could end the story here. And then they all lived happily ever after. But Ram demonstrates the Dharma of a ruler in a very extraordinary way. Our modern rulers, if they could do 1/1000th of this, our planet would be very happy. Our modern rulers, even if they're actually convicted criminals, even if they've done so many immoral things, they still stay in their position, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, it wasn't that long ago, it was within my lifetime. I remember that if the rulers were found to do something immoral, they would leave their position. I remember that. I remember in American elections when one of the candidates was found to have had an affair, he immediately dropped out of the race. I remember that. When the president, Prabhupada was very amazed that President Nixon had resigned the presidency because he was found spying on the other party. It's not that much later than that now people are in power and they can do practically anything. They can have 5 affairs, they can cheat, they can steal, they can anything. And they just stay. But Ram wasn't that kind of a ruler. Even though his wife had done nothing wrong at all, just because somebody was saying, or maybe she did something wrong. He said, we can't have any question. Like I always say, we not only have to be good, we have to look good. We shouldn't put ourselves in a position where people could legitimately question our integrity. Not only should we be of integrity, but we should act in such a way that people will have faith in our integrity. All of us should do that. But what to speak of if you're the ruler, you have to do that. So he sent Sita away, although she was pregnant. And that wasn't hard-heartedness on his part. That was extreme sacrifice. This is his own energy, his eternal consort. But to show this example, that the leaders have to have this level of public trust. So then she had love and Kush in Valmiki's ashram, but they didn't know that they were Ram's sons. And Valmiki taught them the Ramayana, which they later went and sung in Lord Ramachandra's court. And then everything came out that they were the sons of Lord Ramachandra. And then Ram said, you know, I think Sita can come back now. But Sita came and she's like, I've had enough. I'm done. I'm done with people questioning me. I'm done with people doubting me. Let me go back where I came. I came from the earth. Let me go back to the earth. So we could say that this is a great tragedy, and Srila Rupa Goswami says that this pastimes of Lord Ramachandra are in Karuna Ras. They're in the ras of compassion, of sadness, of lamentation. But he says this Karuna Ras in relation to the Lord is ecstatic. And the evidence he gives is that Hanuman has been singing this story from the beginning of time. If we are pained by the separation of Ram and Sita, we should know that when we are chanting Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we are uniting Ram and Sita in our own body. So I don't know, do we have time for discussions and questions, or should we just end here? It's a weekday night and it is 8:15.
We can take some questions.
Few. Anybody have questions or comments or corrections? Any mistakes I've made, you please correct. Yes. Do I think that Ravan was a bad person? Yes. Definitely. You tried to steal the Lord's consort, enjoy her yourself, and make war against the Lord? Absolutely. He epitomizes the bad person. Talk to Krishna about that one. Actually, Prabhupada says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that in one incarnation, Ravana is actually one of the Lord's associates, but generally he's actually evil. We take Ravana as evil. And he's the personification, the epitome of evil. This concept of I'm going to take the Lord's pleasure energy and enjoy it myself. That's really the epitome of what all conditioned souls are trying to do. We're trying to take the Lord's energy and we're trying to enjoy it without him. So, yes. That's bad. We're not supposed to do that. Anybody else? Yes.
Mataji, can you shed some light on Shatrughna?
No. You don't know much about Shatrughna. Is he the one who goes to Mathura and fights with Love and Asura? Yeah. I know that there's a cave in Mathura where Love and Asura went to the lower realms. And so Shatrughna established the kingdom of Mathura free from Love and Asura. And that's about as far as I know. Sorry. Yes? You have a question? Oh, yes, yes. And it's Subbalakshmi. When we used to live in the Detroit temple, the Detroit Iskon temple, every Janmashtami, Sudha Chandrasekhar would dance to the Das Avatar of Sangbai and the Subbalakshmi. And my daughter became her student. My daughter now runs a Bharatanatyam dance school. And generally on Janmashtami, she also has her students perform the Das Avatar to Ms. Subbalakshmi. I really like Subbalakshmi. No, I didn't do any of it. So the artists here, there's devotee Madhava Priya, who did the whole Ramayana. And there's also Sharma, the famous Indian. And then there's Russian devotees, Satchidananda. Some of the paintings are by him. And then there's most of the paintings are by those three artists. And then there's also some paintings, so I don't know who the artist is. But mostly it's those two. I collect art and I support artists. I was trained, I had some training in art, but I haven't kept up on it. Anybody else? If you find out more about Shatrughna, you can let me know. Okay. Anybody else? Yes? Now that's interesting question. Did they all go back to Godhead? We know that when the soldiers died on both sides in the Mahabharata war, that specifically said in the Bhagavatam and the 9th chapter of the 1st canto with the dying of Bhishma, that all the soldiers on both sides went to Vaikuntha, except who didn't go? One exception, Duryodhana. He did not die in the presence of Krishna. So that's a very reasonable assumption. It's a very reasonable assumption that anyone who died there went into Vaikuntha because they died in Ram's presence. So that's, I don't think I want to say absolutely authoritatively that's the case, but that's a reasonable assumption. So thank you very, very much. Prabhupada ki jai, Ramchandra ki jai.
Yes, no.
For you, is it taken Prashadam inside the shop?